I opened Reddit late at night, just to kill some time when I came across a post titled, "I think my neighbor is living someone else's life." And at first I thought it was just another exaggerated internet story, but the way it was written felt different because it started with very small observations like lights turning on at exact same time every night and a person who never seemed to leave his apartment during daytime, yet somehow always appeared outside at random moments in the original poster. Said they started noticing inconsistencies that didn't make sense, like seeing the same man twice in different places within minutes and hearing noises from an empty apartment when no one was supposed to be inside. And the more I read, the more uncomfortable it became, because the writer described how they initially ignored it thinking it was coincidence, but over time the pattern became too consistent to dismiss, especially when they noticed that their neighbor never interacted normally with anyone in the building and avoided direct conversations, while still somehow knowing details about people he was never seen talking to. And things escalated when the poster decided to install a small camera outside their door just to confirm their suspicions. And what they recorded didn't show anything supernatural, but something even more disturbing, because it showed the neighbor standing outside their door at night without making any noise, just standing there for hours without moving or reacting, as if he was waiting for something. And when confronted later, the neighbor acted completely unaware of ever being outside, which made the situation even more confusing because there was clear video evidence, but no logical explanation for his behavior. And the writer began feeling like they were being observed constantly, even when they were alone inside their apartment, and small objects started shifting positions slightly without any obvious reason, like keys being moved from one place to another, or doors left slightly open that were definitely closed before. And this slowly created a growing sense of paranoia, where the line between reality and perception started blurring, because every explanation they tried to find only led to more contradictions. And what made it worse was that other residents in the building refused to talk about the neighbor, as if they were avoiding the topic completely. And whenever the writer tried to ask simple questions, people would suddenly become uncomfortable and change the subject, which made them feel even more isolated and unsure about whether they were imagining things or something genuinely unusual was happening. And the final update in the post came when the writer said they finally decided to move out after one night when they heard knocking on their door at exactly 3:17 a.m. And when they checked the peephole, there was no one there, but the camera footage showed something that they never fully explained in detail, only saying that the recording had been corrupted from that exact moment onward. And the post ended with a warning that sometimes the scariest thing is not what you can see, but what keeps appearing in places where it should not exist. And after reading it, I closed Reddit and tried to forget it. But even now, I sometimes think about how many things around us we ignore just because they don't make sense immediately, and whether some of those things are actually patterns we are just not meant to understand. After I read the original post, I thought it would end there like most online stories do, but a few hours later, I found something strange because I searched for the same username on Reddit again, and the post was gone, completely removed without any explanation, and there was no trace of it in my history except for one cache version that still loaded partially. And what I saw on that cache page made me feel even more uncomfortable, because there was an edit added at the bottom that I had not seen before, and it simply said, "If this post disappears, it means I was right." And that line stayed in my mind longer than I expected, because it felt less like fiction and more like a warning that was not meant for entertainment, but for someone specific. And I tried to convince myself that it was just an internet prank or a psychological horror story designed to get attention, but something about the consistency of details made it feel too structured to be random. And over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it, especially when I started noticing small things in my own apartment, like sounds that didn't match my movement and objects that seemed slightly displaced, even though I live alone and always keep things organized in the same way. And at first I ignored it, thinking it was just my imagination reacting to what I had read, but the feeling didn't go away, and instead it slowly started becoming more persistent, like a background thought that I couldn't silence. Say, a week later, I checked the building forum where residents usually post updates and maintenance requests, and that's when I saw something unexpected, because there was a thread discussing unusual activity in one of the apartments on my floor, and the description matched the same kind of behavior I had read in the Reddit post, including a tenant who rarely interacted with others and was seen at strange hours without clear patterns, and what made it worse was that the post was quickly deleted after only a few replies, which only increased my curiosity and fear at the same time, because now it wasn't just one anonymous Reddit story anymore, but multiple unrelated mentions of the same kind of behavior appearing and disappearing without explanation, and I started paying more attention to my surroundings more than I ever had before, noticing how often the hallway outside my apartment stayed quiet, even when I expected movement, and how sometimes I would hear footsteps outside my door, but when I looked through the peephole there was nothing there. One night, I decided to stay awake and record the hallway myself, just to make sure I wasn't imagining things, and I set my phone camera facing the door and tried to act normal, but inside I was constantly aware of every small sound and movement in the building, and for the first hour nothing happened, until exactly around 3 a.m., I heard a soft sound outside my door, like someone standing very close without knocking or moving, and when I checked the live recording, I saw something that made my stomach drop, because there was clearly a shadow standing directly in front of my door. But when I looked through the peephole in real time, there was nothing there. And this contradiction between what I saw on the camera and what I saw with my own eyes made everything feel unstable, like I couldn't trust either perspective anymore. And I remember sitting on the floor, not knowing whether to open the door or stay completely still, because both options felt equally dangerous in that moment. The next morning, I tried to review the recording again, but the file was corrupted starting exactly from the moment the shadow appeared. And it wasn't just a normal glitch, because the entire segment from that time was replaced with static and audio distortion that didn't match any typical storage error. And that was the moment I started seriously considering that something intentional might be happening rather than random coincidence, and I decided to speak to one of the neighbors directly, but every attempt ended the same way, with people avoiding the conversation or pretending not to understand what I was asking, as if the topic itself made them uncomfortable. And one neighbor even told me quietly that it's better not to ask about people who don't want to be noticed, which made no sense at first, but the way he said it made it feel like he was choosing his words carefully. Over the following days, I began noticing more irregular patterns, like lights turning on in empty rooms across the hallway, and doors that were slightly open in the morning, even though I was certain they were closed at night. And I started feeling like I was constantly being observed without any visible source of observation, and this created a kind of psychological pressure where even silence felt intentional and every small sound felt meaningful, and I stopped sleeping properly because I was waiting for something to happen that I couldn't predict but also couldn't ignore anymore. The final incident happened 3 nights later, when I woke up suddenly at exactly 3:17 a.m. without any alarm or external reason, and I felt an unusual silence in the building, like even the usual background sounds had stopped. And when I checked my door, I heard the same soft presence again, but this time I didn't look through the peephole, and instead I just stood still listening, and after a few seconds I heard something I will never forget, which was the sound of someone slowly turning away from my door and walking down the hallway without urgency. And when I finally gathered the courage to check the camera footage in the morning, there was nothing again except corrupted data starting from that exact time. And this time I realized that whatever was happening wasn't random or isolated, but consistent in timing and behavior, as if it followed a pattern I was slowly becoming part of without understanding it. After that night, I decided to move out immediately, and I didn't even wait to pack everything properly, because the feeling of being inside that space had completely changed. And before leaving, I checked the original Reddit post one last time, and it was still gone. But this time I noticed something I had missed before, which was that my own browsing history showed I had opened it multiple times, even though I only remembered reading it once, and that final contradiction made me question whether I had been following a story or becoming part of it without realizing it. And even now, when I think about that building, I can't fully decide whether everything I experienced was real or just a psychological echo of something I should never have read in the first place. After moving out, I try to forget everything, but sometimes I still catch myself checking the time at exactly 3:17 a.m. without knowing why. And even in my new apartment, small things feel slightly off, like sounds that don't match movement and lights flickering for no reason. And last week I received an email with no sender that simply said, You left without closing it, but when I tried to trace it, there was no record anywhere. And the strangest part is that the old Reddit post suddenly reappeared online again with a new final comment added that wasn't there before, saying, "You were never just reading it." And now I avoid checking my laptop at night because sometimes the cursor moves slightly even when I'm not touching it, as if something is still waiting for me to respond.